Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest Bucks Uncovered webcast on the subject of alcohol use. So, this is following our report that we've published recently on use of alcohol in Buckinghamshire. We're delighted to welcome today Alastair McNeil, who is the Health Liaison Officer for the Chiltern and Thames branch of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm really pleased to say that Alastair has agreed to share some of his own story, powerful story, some of his experience of alcoholism, and also how Alcoholics Anonymous has helped him. So welcome, Alastair. I'm really grateful to you for being here with us today. And over to you, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Henry, for having me on today. It's a pleasure to come and share my experience and yeah, talk to you and share with your viewers about a little bit about alcoholism, where it took me, and how I found recovery and what life is like now as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I haven't got long, so obviously I'm going to condense this into a short period of time, but I'll give you the gist. So I was my alcoholism wasn't apparent from the beginning, in the sense that I didn't drink, obviously, from as soon as I was born. But I guess looking back, I had a lot of fear. In general, it was irrational fear. There was no reason to feel the way I felt growing up. As a kid, I always had everything I needed from my parents, my family. There was no trauma. I had lots of friends, always went on my holidays with my family and stuff. So from the outside looking in, I had a very pleasant, childhood. But inside, there was just something about me that didn't quite feel right. In social situations, I didn't feel like I fitted in. I was crippled with kind of anxiety around people. I had low self-esteem. I always felt I was constantly thinking about what other people were thinking of me. So I guess I kind of felt like I needed to be somebody that I wasn't, because I had this idea of a version of myself that everybody else needed me to be. So, in that context, my life, it kind of was a bit of a performative act from the outside. And you would have thought I was happy. I didn't show any signs of the way I was feeling inside, that discontentment, but it was certainly there. And when I picked up a drink for the first time at the age of 14 years old, it blew me away, the sensation that it gave me. Almost instantly, it was like a superpower to me, because of all of that stuff that was going on inside me that was holding me back in life. That shyness, that inability to talk to females, that self-confidence, low self-esteem, all of that stuff was lifted as soon as I picked a drink up. And yeah, from that moment onwards, I realized that was my kind of solution to life from a social kind of perspective. So yeah, I couldn't get enough of it from the word go. However, I didn't drink alcoholically from the beginning. It was just something that progressed over the years. So as I started earning more money, and I had more money at my own disposal, I drank more. Basically, the more money I had, the more alcohol I would drink. And so my alcohol kind of crept up on me over the years. I was a happy drunk. I wasn't one of these alcoholics that you hear who left a trail of chaos behind. I didn't get into fights. I didn't get into arguments. like some stories you hear, people ending up in prisons, hospitals, every time they pick a drink up. And that is a type of alcoholic, and there are many types of alcoholic, but I was one that was, yeah, I would appear a relatively happy drunk. But then, yeah, alcoholism as a, is an illness which progresses, and it never retreats. So if you've got it, and you've triggered it once you've taken your first drink, yeah, eventually there will be an acceptance that it is something that will never leave you. However, I've learned in recovery that I can live an extremely happy, content life as an alcoholic, and that is thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. So briefly, like my drinking, where did it take me? So it wasn't daily at the beginning, then it became daily throughout my 20s after work. I was sort of, drinking with men much older than me. And then all my friends kind of like grew up and started doing things that you do as you grow up, and they're having kids, getting married, setting pensions up, buying houses, all that sort of stuff. But that wasn't for me, because the most important thing to me was alcohol. I put it in front of everything else in my life. It was that important. But it was ahead of family, friends, my work, you name it. And so, yeah, my kind of life was going nowhere really. But as long as I was drinking, I was happy, I thought anyway. So, long story short, like by the age of, but I'm 44 now, so by my late 30s, I was an everyday drinker. I was drinking around the clock from the moment I woke up till the moment I passed out in the evening. I was drink driving every time I got in a car. I was like basically holding on to a job by the skin of my teeth. I was crying in meetings. My mental health had got a hold of me. I was suffering multiple panic attacks every night, crippling depression. My liver was damaged severely. And, I had doctors telling me that, this is going to kill you sooner rather than later if you continue the way you're going. And I still didn't know how to stop. The choice for me had been removed, because by the end of my drinking, every morning I woke up, I would be able to pass a lie detector test. If you ask me, will I be stopping my drinking today? I genuinely wanted to stop drinking. But the power of the obsession meant that, I picked a drink up, and I just did not know how to stop. So I ended up going to a treatment center because my health was so bad with it. I had the physical withdrawals. And I went to a treatment center, had a detox, came out, felt $1 million. And then, then I thought I was okay. I thought, okay, that's it. I've got rid of like the shakes and all of that sort of stuff that comes with withdrawal. I'm going to drink normally now because I know how bad it got. And, that's the power of this illness. It can convince you that you can return to those happy times that were many, many years ago. So I picked a drink up, and I had my first drink, and it is the first drink that does the damage, because when I pick one drink up, I don't know how to stop, and I have to keep drinking until the alcohol has run out or I pass out. So yeah, I had another 3 months of absolute pain, and then I ended up in another. I picked the phone up to Alcoholics Anonymous during this time though, and I went to some meetings, and it wasn't for me initially because the God word was kind of mentioned. I will explain that it is not a religious program, because that was what frightened me at the beginning. But I kept going to meetings because I saw how happy everybody was, and I quickly learned that this was not a religious cult. Everybody in there, when you think about it, how many alcoholics do you think go in, thinking that they're, well, we all probably don't think there's a God, because we all think that everything that's happened to us, well, there mustn't be a God. Anyway, so did some meetings, really wanted to stop but couldn't, because I was drinking just to make my body feel normal. And then eventually I went for a second treatment in a different treatment centre. But this time on the way there, I was going there knowing that I've picked my last drink up, and I never want to drink again. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about, I'm done. So I went to that treatment centre. It was a 12-step based recovery treatment centre, and yeah, I felt safe in there, and I started my journey of recovery. So I had a plan when I came out. I knew I was going to go straight to an AA meeting. I did that. And from that moment onwards, 25th of February 2021, just over 5 years ago, I haven't picked a drink up one day at a time. And that is purely down to Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12-step program of recovery. So how does it work? So I started going to meetings regularly, and I was told that you need to ideally you need to treat your alcohol, you need to treat your recovery like you did your drinking. So there's no excuse. You'd managed to get a drink every day, therefore there's no excuse that you can't get to a meeting every day for the first 90 days. So I did that. There's lots of meetings in my area, in the area of the Chiltern and Thames. There's over 60 meetings a week. So there's always meetings to get to, different times of days. And so, yeah, I got to as many meetings as I could. And slowly but surely, I started feeling better about myself. And it's basically, the way it works is I could only find recovery and sobriety through sharing my journey with other people who are going through the same thing and have been through the same thing, because there is that level of understanding that not even like the greatest medical professionals can understand, because they've never been inside the head of an alcoholic. And that's where it's so important to, I believe, that the best way of finding recovery, and it's the only way in my case, was to share with that peer-to-peer support that Alcoholics Anonymous offers. And AA meetings are amazing places to be. We, going through the steps, we look at our past. We look to make amends to people that we've harmed. We learn about what made us. We learn about all of that stuff that was going on inside that I explained at the beginning, how I felt, why I felt like that. And it's all about just convincing ourselves that we were never that person that we thought we were. You know, there's a good person in all of us if we're willing to like search for it. And it's changing our behaviors completely, because alcoholics by definition are completely selfish, self-centered people, because alcohol is the most important thing to them ahead of everybody else they love. So in recovery, it's almost about doing the complete opposite with your behaviors. So rather than being selfish, I spend my entire life now thinking about other people, putting other people first, doing service in Alcoholics Anonymous. That gives me self-esteem. That's doing something esteemable. You know, I do this free of charge. It's something I do voluntarily because it makes me feel good about myself. And when I'm feeling good about myself, I don't need to pick a drink up to change the way I feel. You know, I don't need to make myself like numb from alcohol, because I'm enjoying what life has, and you know, what life offers for me. You know, the simple things in life. And recovery's been amazing. You know, everything's changed, but it also hasn't. Like, I haven't been given this wonderful list of material gifts in sobriety. In fact, I'm probably poorer than when I was drinking, but I feel so much happier. And inside, I have that peace and contentment that I'd never had. You know, I go to bed every night and I can fall asleep like that. I can deal with resentments. I can let go of resentments very quickly. You know, I always make sure that you know, I say sorry to someone if I know that I'm wrong. So they're kind of like the spiritual principles. When people like mistake it as a godly program, it's not. It's spiritual principles, and that is by doing the next right thing and putting other people first and not thinking about yourself. And so yeah, Alcoholics Anonymous is full of the most wonderful people you will ever meet. We laugh, we joke. Meetings are like wonderful places to be. It's not doom and gloom like I thought it was going to be. And yeah, it's almost like replace the pub in that it's a fantastic like social thing to do as well. You know, I go out on meals with my friends in AA. We go out and like do activities. So it's just a really good like social pool of people who just want to help each other get well. So yeah, I mean, we really must recommend this to people that are struggling with their drinking, because you know it's free, and everybody who goes to AA has tried everything else. It is the last thing everybody tries, yet it's the only thing that works for many. If only people were willing to try it first, but unfortunately, historically, things have to get really bad before you're willing to give it a go. But it is something I think, you know, you could offer this to people who don't have a problem with alcoholism, because it is a design for living, which will allow you to live a happy life going forward. So yeah, that's me, and that's Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's how I got sober. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Alastair. That was a very powerful story, and fantastic to hear that you've you know, come through the other side and are experiencing such a positive outlook now. And I was particularly taken with your note on the fact that you're a volunteer, and the fact that volunteering is something that has given you a purpose, because we see that in lots of our work, you know, not just in addiction recovery and so on, but in all manner of different activities that what volunteering does for people is incredibly powerful. So thank you. I wondered if I could ask a question, and I think, you know, we're seeing, and our report shows that sort of excessive alcohol use is becoming more and more of a social problem, perhaps one that's a bit hidden. And I note that you said you started at quite a young age in terms of your drinking, of about 14. And is there anything that we can do as a society to better educate young people about the risks? Because I think we all remember drinking probably slightly before we should have done, slightly before 18. And for some people, actually, it's you know, we talk about drug use for teenagers in other terms, you know, sort of they can become addictive and so on. And we don't really seem to educate young people, I don't think, about the addictive properties of alcohol, just that you sort of have to wait till you're 18, as opposed to, you know, actually it is a very highly addictive drug, and it is a drug. So is there something that we can do for our young people to help educate them?
I mean, it's when I was at school, I don't recall there ever being any education as to where alcohol addiction can lead you physically and mentally. You know, I always just thought people who got a bit too drunk when they were out socializing were they just have a bit of a hangover and like move on. You know, there wouldn't be really many consequences. But it's with alcoholism, very rarely is it evident at the beginning how severe the problem is. But it's you almost need to be able to explain to youngsters that over a period of time, if you have a problem with alcohol, that generally, if you've got a problem, in that when you pick a drink up, you can't stop, that will get worse. It's a progressive illness, and it's progressive in that it only keeps getting worse, and it will do that all throughout your life. So you can arrest it by stopping drinking, like I have in recovery. But I've learned through people in recovery who've been many years sober ahead of me, and they thought, do you know what, I haven't drank for 10, 15 years. I haven't thought about a drink for that long. I'm okay. I'm going to stop doing AA, and I'm just going to go back to my normal life. I don't need to drink anymore. And they stopped going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and the illness that we have, it allows you to forget you've got it. So eventually, because you've not been like regularly hanging out with people in recovery, hearing people's stories on a weekly basis at meetings, reminding you how bad your life got with alcohol, eventually you'll pick a drink up again. And when those people pick a drink up, they are, if it's been 10, 15 years without a drink, they are straight back to where they left off when they stopped. So for example, like the physical side of it, it took me 25 years to get to that stage where I'm suffering the withdrawal, and withdrawal from alcohol is more dangerous than withdrawal from heroin, which I didn't know. But you're more at risk of dying through going cold turkey, stopping at drinking alcohol, than you are from heroin. And I've gone 5 years without a drink now, and I know through other people's experiences that if I picked a drink up and I just had a couple of nights drinking the way I used to drink, that withdrawal, that physical withdrawal stuff that I used to experience, where I'd be at risk of seizures, that would be back immediately. That is not something that you have to take 25 years building up again. So I know that I can't ever return to a period where it was safe to drink. So yeah, youngsters just need to realize where it can take you. If you've got a drinking problem where you don't know how to stop, then it's worth sort of talking to somebody about it. Because life is amazing without alcohol. I struggled for a long time not wanting to stop, because I thought I wouldn't be able to go to parties, I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself without alcohol, because life had become so normalized. Like, being drunk was more normal than not being drunk, and I didn't know how to do life without it. I've quickly discovered, since I've removed alcohol from my life, I can still do all those things, go to parties, weddings, birthdays. I can socialize with friends who are drinking, and I wake up in the morning and I just can't believe the luck I've got, how happy I am to be alive. It's like, I do everything that I couldn't do from drinking. I'm out running every morning. I get out, walk the dog. I go to the gym. I experience when I hear the birds singing and all these kind of like sensory things that I never used to have. I've only been given one shot at living on this planet, and I spent 40 years not appreciating that opportunity that I've been given. But now I do, and that's because of that. I'm in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alastair. I mean, I think the fact that you're sharing your story, and hopefully that it's heard loudly by young people around the risks associated with alcohol, means that you're doing a fantastic job in educating, and I think that's probably the primary thing. We need to make sure that we are communicating and educating young people around the risks and dangers, and not just promoting the more positive side. So I think a balanced view of alcohol use is incredibly important, particularly the dangers at the more extreme on the more extreme ends of how bad it can get. So thank you, Alastair. We'll draw the conversation to a close, and I'd like to thank you hugely for your time and for the work you do as a volunteer, supporting others. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry.